Welcome, everyone. I'm Jack Llewellyn, and this is Cartels, Conspiracies, and Camarena. So in the last couple of weeks, we've been doing some introductory things on Mexican cartels in Mexico. Today, we're going to look at some maps. We're going to look at the geography of Mexico. We're going to look at routes of entry for drugs from Mexico into the United States. And then we're going to take a quick look at where the dominating cartels are located in Mexico. Now, one giant caveat. It is impossible to take a snapshot of the cartel situation in Mexico and have it be accurate. It changes all the time. So we're going to give best analysis. We're going to do a little bit of an overview. The Mexican government has recently provided some maps, some very, very, very detailed maps of cartels and factions and plazas in Mexico. We are not going to go into that level of detail, at least right now. But what we are going to do, again, is look at some maps. We're going to do some screen sharing, which hopefully with any luck goes reasonably well. And if not, the magic of editing may take over. But we're going to start with this map right here, and hopefully it's large enough for you to see. So this is just the general picture of Mexico. A couple of things. One is it's big. It's a lot bigger than I think Americans give it credit for. Look on the north border. It starts at San Diego and Tijuana and moves all the way over to the Gulf Coast, the tip of Texas, and then it goes all the way down to Guatemala and Belize to the south. So very large, has a lot of coastline, both on the east and west sides. And then, of course, you have Baja California and Baja California Sur. You have the larger cities. If you look in the central portion of Mexico, about maybe two-thirds of the way down, you'll see Mexico City with the red dot. Go up and to the west or left of Mexico City, and you see the city of Guadalajara. Guadalajara, of course, famous in the Narcos series and things of that nature. Beautiful city, large city, very large city, very, very large city, but beautiful. Lots of architecture, lots of art, lots of culture. A beautiful city. I really enjoy going there, even though I will admit the traffic there scares the hell out of me. But having said that, then you can go up north. You'll see Monterrey, another very large city. And go further up north, you'll see Ciudad Juarez, which is right across the border from the Mexican city of El Paso. And then if you move over to the west, on the north and northwest side, you'll see Tijuana and Mexicali. Okay, so that's the big cities. That's the big nature of Mexico. Keep in mind, if you go down to Mexico City, and if you run kind of north-south from Mexico City through about two-thirds of this country, you'll find that there's mountains and a lot of mountain ranges. And some significant mountains. Remember, anytime that athletes go to Mexico City to compete, it's at a high altitude. And because of that, there are some areas where there's less production of drugs and narcotics, clearly less people in some of those areas. So the geography does play a little bit of an issue with respect to the cartels. All right. Now, one thing that we want to do, so we want to get an understanding of Mexican states. Okay? They have a state system just like the United States does, very, very similar. Let's look at some of the states here, and we're going to blow this up a little bit. Okay, so starting on the northwest side, again, you have Baja California, which has Mexicali and Tijuana, Baja California Sur, which notable for La Paz. Then you have the states that we know about, right? That you hear about with respect to the cartels a lot. Primarily Sonora, next to it to the east, Chihuahua, or as Les Nessman on WKRP in Cincinnati, if everybody remembers that, he called it Chai Hua Hua. Anyways, then below Sonora on the coast, you have Sinaloa. Go a little bit further down from that, and you have the state of Jalisco, which is where Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta are. Colima is a little bitty coastal community or a coastal state. And then you hit Michoacan, Guerrero, Oaxaca, Chiapas. Okay, that's all along the coast of the Pacific Ocean. If you go back up to Jalisco, which is, again, the one in kind of pink on the coast, if you go up a little bit north of it, you'll see Zacatecas and Durango, big, important states for our purposes. Then go to the East Coast, the Gulf of Mexico, and go down and you'll see Veracruz, highly important, highly influential. And then let's see if we can move this a little bit. Yeah, so then you can go over and you'll end up in the Yucatan and Quintana Roo, which is where Tulum and Playa del Carmen and Cancun are, which borders up against Belize. And then to the west and south of Belize is Guatemala, which also borders Mexico, the states of Chiapas, Campeche, and Tabasco. So that's it really quickly. Those are the really important ones. You can see kind of where they fit. You can see the Mexico presidency, again, kind of in the middle of, or the lower third in the middle of the country. But those are the states that we talk about a lot. And I think it's really important when we start talking about the cartels, when we start talking about their influence, and we're going to look at a couple of maps in a couple of minutes, to understand kind of their relationship, where they are, where the bigger cities are, all of those sorts of things. Okay. All right. Now we're going to try and do something a little bit fancy. So I am going to stop screen sharing for just a moment. And then I'm going to try to bring up a different map. Boom. There we go. Okay. So here is another map of Mexico. But what we're going to do through the power of PowerPoint and PDF, we are going to try to draw. So one of the things we want to talk about is, where do drugs generally come through Mexico or from Mexico into the United States? Well, obviously, the first place to think about are the border communities, the ports of entry, right, from Mexico into the United States. And we're going to highlight those in yellow. So right here at Matamoros, we have the city of Brownsville, Texas. Nuevo Laredo, very big, very important right there. Of course, Laredo right across the border, right across the river. Remember, the Rio Grande runs right along here. Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, kind of dual cities right here. Hugely important, right? Then you get Nogales down to the south of Tucson. And then you have kind of the Mexicali, Tijuana area right here. So those are all in yellow. And what you can see is you have ports of entry that go all the way across the southern border between Mexico and the United States, southern border of the United States, northern border of Mexico, cross several U.S. and Mexican states. And then you have a lot of kind of area in between. Remember, the distance between Nuevo Laredo and El Paso and Ciudad Juarez is long. Didn't look it up, but it's a long ways. So lots of territory in here. Chihuahua, of course, when we first started talking, we talked about the 1984 raid on Buffalo, the Rancho Buffalo, where they had the huge marijuana plantation that, of course, was in Chihuahua. So those are the by land ports of entry. And the DEA and others estimate that the vast majority of drugs going from Mexico into the United States actually go through these ports of entry in one form or another, or one way or another, one manner. But there are other ways that they can get in. And we want to look at something else. We want to look at ports of entry, actual ports where cartels have a significant influence and use that influence to transport drugs into the United States via ships and shipping, whether that's in barges, in containers that are on ships or otherwise. Okay? So we're going to do this. Let's do these in red. So you've got Ensenada right up here, right under Tijuana, Baja California, one of the ports of entry that is said to be heavily influenced by cartels. Come down to Baja California Sur, and here's another one at La Paz. I think it's pretty easy to see why those could be of interest. All right. Then in Sinaloa, you have Mazatlan. Beautiful beaches. Cruise ships stop there. People go there for vacation, but it also has a very significant port, industrial port city. And it has a lot of, it's in Sinaloa. It has a lot of cartel activity associated with it. Lots of issues, we've talked about before. If you're a tourist in Mazatlan, stay in the tourist areas. So you have that. Again, don't forget, here's Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara right underneath Mazatlan. All right. Then in Colima, it's not actually on the map here, but someplace on the border of Colima, you have a port called Manzanillo, another very important port right in here. And obviously that's not very precise. But in Michoacan, you have the port of Lozano Cardenas, right? Another important port. So you can see you've got, right along the Northern Pacific Ocean here, quick trips into, quick being relatively speaking, into San Diego or Los Angeles areas. All right. Then you also have one that's pretty important, according to reports I read, right over here in Campeche, called Ciudad del Carmen. All right. And this one obviously allows for shipping to go in lots of different directions up north into the United States. Also allows you to go to areas along the coast and then move by ground. Also has quick access to Quintana Roo and the Yucatan. Keep in mind that if you've ever been there, it's not a simple drive going across. There aren't super highways in a lot of these areas. So even though it may look close, it's not necessarily always the case. All right. Now we're going to try one more thing here we're going to move over and do some drawings instead, and we'll put it in blue. There are 3 primary routes when they talk about drug distribution through Mexico. You generally speak about 3 or so routes, and we're going to draw them on the map here just to give you a general idea. This is not obviously to scale. I am not an artist, but you will see. So the first one that we want to talk about is the Gulf Cartel. Starts down in here, in kind of Campeche, Chiapas, Guatemala area, comes up and it goes through the state of Veracruz and ends up in Matamoros and Brownsville area. Okay? That is the Gulf route, or generally referred to as the Gulf route. Now we want to talk about what we refer to as the Central route. The Central route starts in Veracruz someplace, goes kind of through or around Mexico City, we got to go up to kind of Zacatecas area, and then it ends up going to Nuevo Laredo. It ends up going to a place called Piedras Negras, and then you also come up and you go through Chihuahua So let's say through Chihuahua, isn't that great drawing, up to Ciudad Juarez. Okay, that is generally the central route. I probably should have drawn that in different colors, but here, let's see if we can do this. So that's going to be the Gulf route. How's that? This is going to be the central route. And then we're going to have the Pacific route, which we will put in a different color. How's that? Let's go back to, let's do deep green for this. And we're going to start again down in Chiapas and Guatemala, someplace in here. And we're going to go not exactly along the coast through Oaxaca or Guerrero, but you're going to come up through those. And then you start getting pretty close to the coast when you hit Tepic and Puerto Vallarta. It'll come up through Culiacan and ends up at Nogales. And then it also goes through and over to here. And then you have a couple of shoot-offs, perhaps. And that is known as the Pacific route. And you also have, let's make this another color. Let's do a purple one here for this. You have some additional routes. So you've got routes that go from the coast through Colima. Again, that starts at the port that we talked about, both Manzanillo, and then perhaps down here, the port through Michoacan comes up. You also have another distribution route that kind of goes here and then taps in or feeds into the central one if it doesn't go through the Gulf route. All right, that is a very shorthand look. But what you can see is the whole city or the whole country is covered, right? And virtually all of the land routes into Mexico are addressed here or dealt with. All of the ports, for the most part, with the exception of La Paz here in Baja California Sur, those are the general routes for the distribution of drugs through Mexico into the United States. And obviously, we're not suggesting that everything starts down here. But if you have drugs coming up through Central America, oftentimes from South America, these are places that they will come in. These are the routes that they will take. And it's kind of the generalized distribution route for the Mexican cartels. Really wish this was more interactive so I knew if there were questions. But this is basically where we're going to go from here. Now, another map. Remember when we started, I said it is really, really hard to do a snapshot. I probably looked at 50 or more potential maps to show you today, and I didn't like any of them. Old ones, new ones. Be careful, too. Man, if you pull up, if you just do a Google search for maps of cartels, you're going to find maps from 2014 pop up. You're going to see maps that don't have CJNG on it anymore. So it's really hard to find good ones. But let's look at what we do have, okay? If you look at the green, the dark green here, so Baja California Sur, Jalisco, Colima, Nayarit, those are what we're going to call the strongholds of the CJNG at the moment. Then I also want you to look at Veracruz on the right. Veracruz, parts of Tabasco are listed here as CJNG versus Zetas. It ain't versus no more. Almost all of this is now CJNG territory. There are remnants of the Zetas in a few places, but by and large, they're gone. Then all of this up here, Nuevo León, San Luis Potosi, this map shows it as being Zetas versus Gulf. It's not. Gulf cartel is very limited anymore. Zetas is very limited anymore in this area. And this is a newer area for contention between CJNG and CDS, right? So you see some places here that it says Sinaloa and CJNG. those should be in this color more, along with Zacatecas. And again, you can see why Zacatecas is so important. If you have CJNG growing north, growing east, you got the stronghold of Sinaloa and Durango. If Zacatecas would be taken over by CJNG, that could put them in a really bad situation, right? Now, Quintana Roo, Yucatan, to some extent, those are battles between CJNG and Sinaloa. But this is really important. It's so oversimplified to say CJNG and Sinaloa, okay? Because there's lots of subgroups, there's lots of factions. Again, it's not like everybody shows up wearing uniforms and goes to a main square and says, okay, we're here. This is CJNG, this is Sinaloa. There's lots of other influences, but predominantly that's what we're looking at here. Baja California also has it as CJNG and versus Sinaloa. What we do know is up here in Tijuana Cartel still exists in some form or fashion, AFO, whatever you want to call it. That group tends to be more or less powerful when it is associated with one or other of the cartels. Primarily, recently, either Sinaloa or CJNG. I think the predominant authority in this area now is not CJNG, and that extends some into Baja California Sur, but this is really more Sinaloa. And I did a podcast today talking a little bit about comparing and contrasting CJNG and CDS, Sinaloa Cartel. And in that, we talked a little bit about the influence of CDS in Baja California Sur. Sonora, same way, probably some battles still going on. Depending on who you talk to, you might tip the scale in favor of CDS in some respects. Chihuahua, again, it talks about Sinaloa versus Juarez. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think the vast majority of Chihuahua is more Sinaloa territory, if anything. And again, recognizing that especially Sonora, Chihuahua, you're going to have lots of different smaller cartels, smaller factions, gangs. You got the Caborca cartel in Sonora. You've got other influences in Chihuahua. But in Ciudad Juarez, you've got the battle between the remnants of the Gulf Cartel and the remnants of the Juarez Cartel, looking for control. And we've talked about in the past, right, the thought that CDS might be getting some favored status in Ciudad Juarez as the other groups start to fade away in some form or another. And then you're going to have little pockets of BLO. You're going to have different pockets of other cartels. Come down over here. So if you go to the East Coast or the West Coast, I'm sorry, you see the strongholds for CJNG and Jalisco, of course, Colima, and right below that you have Michoacana, or officially Michoacan de Campo. La Familia Michoacana, I think, is back. And talk about, if it's the same people or the same name. For a while, there was the name Nueva La Familia Michoacana. That Nueva part has gone away, just using the La Familia Michoacana name or title now. They definitely have some power, some influence, so I think they're important to keep in mind. And then you'll see there are just some areas that really don't have a whole lot going on, or if you do in like Oaxaca and some other areas, that may be more controlled by local groups with some influence. I can tell you almost without a doubt there are elements of CJNG and Sinaloa in almost every state. Okay. Again, it's not like you cross over from Sinaloa into Nayarit and you know they're checking a passport. You're going to be kept out. That's not how it works. But these are the areas where they predominate. And I think, again, it's so important. If we're going to talk about cartels, if you're going to understand cartels, if you want to think about public policy, you want to understand the issues at the border, you have to understand these maps. You have to understand and have a concept of who is in control, what are they trying to do, what are the routes to get product into the United States, and then you can start to address the issues. You can start to think about them. All right. That is a very short, may not have seemed that way, but that's a very short primer on the geographic influence of Mexican cartels in Mexico today. In our next video, we're going to talk about a seminal event in the history of Mexican cartels. That's the 1985 kidnapping of DEA Special Agent Enrique Kiki Camarena, February 7, 1985. So look out for that. Subscribe to the channel if you like this at all. In addition to videos like this, I do a lot of news updates. Whenever anything new comes out, I do a short. You'll get notice of that. So if you like it, subscribe. And last, if you like what you're seeing, take a look at my book, Someone Had to Die. You can see it on my webcast. And any comments, thoughts, places to talk about, things that I missed, things where you disagree, let me know in the comments. I love it. I appreciate it. And with that, have a good day. Thanks for joining me on Cartels, Conspiracies, and Camarena.